Juggling motherhood and modern day life can be stressful and relentless, but it doesn't need to be this way. The Joy of Being podcast is the answer to maternal mental health, bringing sustainable relief and calm to hardworking mums everywhere so that you, your family and work can thrive. My name's Marina Pearson and I'm your host, transformational coach and mum who loves to interview business owners, transformational professionals and creatives to have insightful conversations about what it takes to really live a life that is thriving, fulfilling and full of joy. And today I've got some amazing news. You can now order your very own version of the Joy of Being book, supporting hardworking mums to stress less and live more. If you're the type of mum who is struggling with the burdens of motherhood or modern day life, then this will be a perfect book for you. If you're curious, you want to know more and you want to see what's up with that book, you can do so at www.marinapearson.com/book. So on today's show, I'm super excited to be interviewing Chipman. Chip is somebody that I've been working with over the last 4 or 5 years. He is somebody that has shared 3 principles around the world to corporations, to individuals, to people in prison, and has some really incredible, profound and miraculous stories to share around how we all actually have innate health, whether we know it or not. So I got him on today because I know how profoundly impacted I have been and the changes that I've seen in my relationships with those around me, my ex-husband, my child, my nearest and dearest family in Madrid. And more than any of those, it's been the relationship with myself that's completely transformed. From somebody who went from pressing episodes, suicidal episodes, to somebody now who's actually has the capacity to laugh at herself. So without further ado, I don't want to keep you waiting anymore because the conversation we had was very profound and very personal to Chip. And he talked about his relationship with his dad, his relationship with his son, the relationship that he has with his wife. And through his stories, you can see the hope and the magic that we all have inside of us and how it's possible to thrive in relationship, even when we can't see how. Enjoy. So welcome everybody. And on today's show, I have the wonderful Chip Chipman. I have known Chip for the last 4 years, maybe even 5 now, actually. And I was introduced to him by my mentor at the time, who was Jamie Smart. And I went on retreat with them for the first time. And oh boy, did I go deep. And since then, Chip and Jan, his wife, have become wonderful friends and just beautiful people in my life. I've worked with them on and off for these 4 years. And to be honest, I don't know where I would be in terms of the experience that I have in my life if it wasn't for these amazing people. So I'm just really, really honored to have you here today, Chip. Welcome.
Well, thank you, Marina. It's always good to spend time with you. Well, we always have such a good time.
We do, don't we? We always have a bit of a giggle. So,
we do.
So if we do giggle a lot on this show, we're not going to apologize for that. We hope that you giggle with us.
With us.
Yeah. I'd love to start with Chip, because I know obviously you the angle that you take in this understanding is relationships. And I'd love us to start with why that was so important to you in terms of and what's changed for you. So if anybody's listening and they're going through a really hard time with their relationships, let's start there.
Well, thank you. And again, it's really a pleasure to do this. I've been looking forward to it. So with regards to where I come from on it, it's true that we talk about relationships a fair bit, Jan and I, but finding some health within ourselves, finding a little bit more of our true self, and sharing that with others is the main thing. And relationships is really a natural outcome of doing that. A change in our relationships is a natural outcome of doing that. So as a bit of background, Jan and I just had our 50th wedding anniversary. So we've been married for 50 years.
I can't even conceive.
I know. I don't feel old enough to be married for 50 years, fortunately. But when we first came across the principles, and at the time it wasn't even called the principles, it was Citibank's. Right? It was the originator of the 3 principles. when we came across that, we were in the process of starting a divorce. We've been married about 6 or 7 years. And what I remember is that I couldn't see a way out. I couldn't see a way for that to improve. We literally could not be in the same room together without arguing and getting upset. And so it just seemed impossible to me. And we'll circle back to it, but here's what's interesting when I think back to that particular time is we met Sid Banks, and Jan met him first and had a really profound change just from one encounter, just an hour or so with him, an accidental meeting. And she literally came home a different person, which took me quite a while to accept. I mean, I'm talking weeks. But what's really interesting is our marriage within a couple of weeks turned around and we started really enjoying each other's company. And when I look back at now, this is what I find very interesting about that. I look back at it now and I really can't tell anybody exactly what we changed. It's like we stopped arguing, the arguing fell away. We started having more fun. We started enjoying each other's company like when we first met, because we had a really great relationship when we first met. But I don't remember thinking, I won't do this anymore and I need to get rid of that habit. I don't really remember that. It just changed. And essentially, my analysis of that is that Jan heard something that took her to her true self, which was, if you've listened to the principles for a while, you have that idea that no matter what you've been through, the true self, because it's spiritual in nature, has not, will not, cannot ever be damaged. It just can't. It's not of this world, so it can't be damaged. And that's kind of the essence of the idea of innate health and principles. So when Jan came home from her first encounter with Sid and she just looked healthy and happy, and which really didn't add up to me. Like, I thought you had to go to the Zendo for years and years and years, and after that maybe go to Japan and India and all the searching and thing. You don't just go off in an afternoon and come back just happy and just solid. So it took me a while to accept that. And in fact, at first I did less than accept it because I resisted and argued, and it seemed just way too simple to me. It just was way too simple. The saving grace with that was that Jan's change was permanent. And it was permanent in the face of me trying to bring her back where I knew her. Now, I don't mean that I was consciously doing that, but in that first few weeks when she had found this happiness, I would try to hook her into an argument. I would try to upset her. This is in hindsight, but it was pretty constant, so I know something was going on. I wanted her back where I knew the handles in the relationship, so to speak. And it wouldn't work. Like, I could get her upset for a moment or two. I could get her to argue with me for a moment or two, but I always saw that moment when it just stopped. And later on, I realized that what would happen then is she was just not going to go there. She would return to that feeling of health. And sometimes she'd have to leave me and go for a walk to do it, but she would do it. And I really at first thought this change was temporary. I thought, well, this will go away. It's just some kind of, she's met some charismatic person and blah, blah, blah. But the fact that it was sustained finally got my curiosity up. So I've seen this process many times around the principles. When somebody first encounters somebody who's had a change, if it's somebody close to you, my first experience was confusion. It just really confused me. And what I didn't see at the time is that confusion was healthy, because I was pretty sure I knew how the world was constructed, and all of a sudden I was very confused. Nothing that I tried worked from the old world. But eventually, because Jan's change was sustained and I could see that she was healthier, I could see that she was happier. Whether I wanted to deny it or not, I could still see it. And eventually that confusion turned to curiosity. And then I started to listen and eventually went to hear Sid Banks speak. And I still hung out in that low level for a while, just kind of hanging on. But I remember the moment when I really saw something for the first time. We've been going along. Our marriage was already better in spite of the fact that I couldn't figure out why. We were definitely feeling better. But I was still kind of hanging out of that's your world and I'm stuck here kind of thing. And And I was sitting on the couch one morning really early, like 6:30, 7 o'clock in the morning. We were up. And Jan was on the floor playing with our son, Peter. And the sun was coming in the window at a super low angle, coming through the window, and it was in their hair, the two of them. And I was looking at it, and for some reason, it just caught my attention. And as I was looking at him, this feeling just rushed in. And I just filled up and teared up. And I remember thinking, wow, all I have to do is surrender. Mm-hmm. And everything changed after that. That was the moment of change for me. And that was before I ever met Sid Banks. Dad had met him, but I hadn't. So it's just fascinating for me to look at that and see how when one person takes care of their own health, which is the essence of how we work with couples, by the way. We don't necessarily put people together when they first work with us. We work with them individually because we found through our own experience, like what happened with us, when one person finds a new level of health and is able to let go of all of that sticky stuff and just maintain their own health and their own state of mind, the relationship is automatically changed. Automatically changed. And it's not to say that in every case it'll work out, because I'll put it this way. There was a possibility that I didn't see that it wouldn't change. And if Jan had to move on at that point, that would have been the right thing for her to do, right? But lucky me, I finally did get a glimpse. But it was fascinating because we didn't really have to address all the issues. Mm-hmm. It just changed. Now, having said that, as we started to feel better, we did talk about things that had bothered us before, but we were talking about those things, both of us in a good state of mind. So we were able to resolve and make changes. I don't know if that's making any sense so far.
But no, it does, and I've seen this for myself, where my ex and I, and you know him, and we, for many years, were coming from this place of defending our realities a lot. And recently, I don't know, I guess I just stopped doing that. And what's been fascinating to me is that for the first time ever, he actually reached out to me to tell me what an amazing mom I am.
Ah, beautiful.
Now, this, in the context of that, has come from a place of the usual narrative was coming from, I'm a better parent, I know better. Mm-hmm. And that's gone from that to, you're an amazing mother. Now, it wasn't, I was just not, like, to me, that was just really unexpected, like, just totally did not expect that. But it makes sense to me that that's what he sees because of where I am right now, or where I was to where I am. And it apparently was always his fault. It had nothing to do with me. I was doing the work. Like you need to wake up. It's got nothing to do with me. And actually I reflected on that when he sent me that text. And I thought, oh my God, it must have had something to do with me.
That's beautiful. What a beautiful thing, though, Yeah. And how beautiful for Leo.
Yeah. That's very much so. And, Mark and I would be at loggerheads a lot of the time. And now I go and spend time there in the States with him. We've learned to be around each other and to actually remember what it is to enjoy each other's company.
Yeah. That's great.
So it's possible, right? It really is possible. And so if somebody's listening in, Chip, and they're going, yeah, this sounds great. Sounds wonderful. But what do I do? But what do I do? That's usually the question that a lot of my mums ask me is, what do I do now? Like, that's great. And so what? What does that do for me? What does that do for the relationship?
Well, using you as an example, it's really, to me, it's very clear what it does for the relationship. we've all been conditioned in our relationships to do the habits that we have together. You say this, I do that. You do that, I react in this way. And in the case of Jan and I, and in the case that you're talking about as well, when one person decides just to get quiet and take care of their own health, irregardless of the relationship, which sounds a little weird, I do appreciate that. But when you take care of your own state of mind, what happens is you break that habit. You break through that mutual habit of how we react to each other. And that's got to happen no matter what for a relationship to improve. So many, many times we've seen where one person finds their health, gets much less reactive to the other person's stuff, pulls back and just takes care of themselves. And that other person has an expectation of a response. They've had it for years in many cases, right? And all of a sudden it's not there. And it's like in my case, it's beautiful because that confusion I talked about is super healthy. Because before that confusion, I was pretty sure of how the world was constructed, right? And the confusion is like taking you off of that, and it's breaking the pattern of the back and forth in the relationship. It breaks the pattern, right? Once the pattern's broken, there's a chance for newness to come in. And even if it only comes in one part, the relationship is fundamentally changed. And that the other person doesn't have the echo chamber to bounce off of, so to speak, to get into, to get the back and forth going. So in that sense, at least creates a space where what you've been doing stops for the most part. Yeah. Then there's the chance that the other person will observe that and see that health. And in seeing that health, move from from confusion to curiosity, And then there's a chance of you both learning together. So, say, what do I do? Well, what you do, and I wish it was more complicated because people like it.
I know. What are the steps? Give me the 5 steps.
In some ways, I wish there were 5 steps. But really, the main step is to learn to listen to something that takes you inside, to that place in you that's healthy. And most people are even people I talk to as new clients want to say, well, yeah, I'd like to do that, but let me resolve this first. I don't see how I can do that unless this mess gets cleaned up. And I just have to tell you, it works the other way around. It's an opposite. It doesn't really matter. That's probably a cold way of putting it. No, I'll just say it. It doesn't really matter what's going on in the details of your life. You can always find that quiet within, that health within. And once you connect with that, you look back at what you've been through and you see it with a whole new level of understanding because you're getting out of the relativity of all that thinking. You're getting to look at it from a neutral place. And believe me, there's incredible power in that neutrality. First of all, in terms of giving you a quieter, more peaceful state of mind, which is what everybody's really looking for. But secondly, it gives you a different look at that other person. You begin to see, this is the way I see it anyway, that people are basically psychologically innocent. They do what they do because of their own conditioning and belief systems and thinking. And there's a type of innocence in that, right? Like nobody would say, I want to have a combative marriage. Nobody would want to say, I want to have a combative relationship with my father, my brother. Yeah, nobody wants that, but we do fall into it. And once the fault game gets going, your fault, my fault, boy, it's really quite hard to break that pattern. Until one person has the insight that their state of mind is solely in their hands. And the wonderful thing about that is once they see that, it actually changes how they see the other people, another person, and breaks the pattern. It breaks the pattern.
It's like the referee of a boxing match. Because I know before even coming on tonight that I asked you to share your story with your dad, because for me, I can't even, for me, that's just such a miracle story. Because I know that was a relationship that, based on the context in which you found yourself in, was Like, how is that even possible? Like, okay, fair enough, my wife, whatever.
Yeah, right.
My father, like, no, he's the exception. So I'd love you to share, because, yeah.
Yeah, my father was the exception. And by way of background, I'm the oldest of 11 kids. And my dad was quite a strong alcoholic. I mean, he really had it bad. And at times he could be very violent, you know. And so by the time I was a young man, I had a pretty strong hatred for my father. I couldn't think about him in any way without a bad feeling, without hatred, absolute hatred and loathing, you know. And even for a year or two after I met Sid, I couldn't shake that feeling about my father, right? I just seen too much, and especially as the oldest son, because as I turned into a teenager, I ended up in the middle of it a lot between my mother and my father. And so I definitely had this profound hatred for my father. And I'd gotten to the point where there was a period where I didn't speak to him of 12 or 13 years, something like that, because I never let him meet my kids either. When my kids were born, they knew they had a grandfather, but I think we went with each of them when my mom was around so she could see the baby. But after that, they never had any contact with my father. And so when I first started listening to Sid Banks, I mean, it was great. My marriage was changing and everything, but there was something he would talk about that would just get me upset every single time. And what it was, he'd talk about forgiveness, you know, and about how you really won't get a really quiet mind until you get the spirit of forgiveness, because that's what fills your head, you know, in a lot of cases. It was definitely partly what filled my head, not necessarily with concrete thoughts, just the feeling and the defensiveness and my stance towards the world. All of that came out of that experience. Freud was correct to that extent, that we're a product of our experiences. The only thing Freud didn't know is that while that's true, it's still just thought. It's the gift we have, right? So anyway, Sid would talk about forgiveness, and I'd get upset. And at one night, I actually walked out of one of his talks because he was going on about forgiveness, and I was so upset I felt sick, you know. And I remember thinking, you don't know what I've seen. There are things that are unforgivable, right? So I left, and I got a call from the next day and said, "Are you okay?" And I said, Sid, I love what you say and what you teach. And I understand when you start talking about forgiveness, you're talking about a quiet mind. And I can see intellectually why that would be true, that forgiving would give you a quieter mind. But I said, I just came right out with this. And you haven't seen what I've seen. You haven't experienced, so you really can't talk to me about forgiveness. He said, well, do you want to come over? I said, yeah. So I drove across the island to Sid's house. It was one of maybe in 43 years that I knew him. It was one of maybe 3 occasions when he actually talked about something personal in my life. He would always say, you don't have to talk about your problems. He would just lead you to that health, and you'd see for yourself. But in this case, he told me to come over. So I did. I went over to his house. And it's on your mind. Well, you want to hear it? I told him the worst couple of stories I could think of. And I didn't leave out any details. Yeah. It was pretty gruesome. And I could see it upset him, that he reacted to it. I could see the compassion and the sorrow as I was talking to him. I remember thinking to myself, finally, he understands that some things are unforgivable, And then we had a long, quiet pause. We were just sitting there in his living room looking out to sea. And finally he says, Chip, your father must have really been suffering to have done those things. And I just freaked out. My father was suffering, and I walked out on him again. I'll see you later. And I drove home. I think we had a fairly unique relationship that way. I think maybe that's part of the reason you like to hang out with me a bit, is I was what I was, and I said what I saw. So anyway, I had this experience that night. Went to bed, and Jan was sleeping, and I couldn't sleep. And partly because I was thinking about that conversation. But for some reason, I started to think of some terrible things I'd said to Jan before this change. Really cruel, mean, spirited, nasty things I'd said when we were arguing. You know, that feeling like, oh God, I wish I had, I could only take that back kind of thing. How could I have said that to Jan? And I was just cringing in bed. And then out of nowhere, this kind of peace just washed over me. Wow. And I remember the insight was very simple. I just thought to myself, that's from this old world over here. You don't even live in that world anymore. And it's not even possible in the world that you live in now. And I remember I teared up I just was so grateful to see that those were two different worlds and that I no longer lived in the world where that was possible. And I just felt so grateful. I fell asleep and I slept for like 11 or 12 hours, which was really unusual for me. Normally, I'm a 6 or 7 hour person. I don't sleep that long. But I slept for about 12 hours. And when I woke up, I couldn't get my finger on it. I just felt so light and free and at peace. But I could not. I mean, it was a long time after that I realized what had actually happened. Right? That there was volumes of thinking that I'd let go of, and I just felt better. A couple of weeks later, I'm in the same position. Jan's asleep, and I'm lying in bed. And for some reason, I started thinking about my father. And when I did, I went right back to our last fight together. The night I left home, I was not quite 17. You know, we had a really tough encounter, physical encounter. And I got sick laying there thinking about it, and all that kind of hatred just rushed in. I'm just thinking those thoughts again, and I hadn't felt like this for a long time by now. It's just really, really negative. And then the same thing happened. It just broke. And I just felt this peace. And I had this insight, and the insight was really, really simple. And the insight was, my father was living in a world that was handed to him. He didn't even know that another world existed outside of that world, and he was lost in it. And if he hadn't have been, he would have known better. And if he'd known better, he would have done better. It was just super clear to me. It was like I saw that my father was innocent. Not innocent of the deeds. I would never have let him do the deeds again. That's a totally different conversation. But innocently lost in a world that had been handed to him by his father, you know? And I was so shocked because I was laying there and seeing that. And then out of nowhere, I just felt this profound feeling of love for my dad, you know? And it really surprised me. It really surprised me. Really. Same thing. I fell asleep and I slept a long time, 10 or 11 hours. When I woke up this time, I think I really had more of an understanding what had happened because I just felt so light. But I sort of knew that what had disappeared, if you can imagine the volumes and volumes and volumes of thinking and beliefs and ways of reacting to the world that revolved around that experience when I was a kid with my father. And now it all dissolved. It just dissolved. And I felt so light. And that's the first time I came to understand the role of insight in creating a state of meditation. Because when all that thought fell away, that's what was left was a stronger state of meditation, a quiet mind, a sense of peace. So that was amazing. And I told Jan about it in the morning, and it was her suggestion, actually. She suggested we start calling my dad, which we did. He was so confused. Like after 12 or 13 years, hello, how you doing? and it, he was very, he didn't know what to do with it. So at first it was like, I'll see you later. He wouldn't talk for more than a couple of minutes, right? But I just committed to calling him every couple of weeks. And so we did. Sometimes even more often than that. And eventually got around to, at least he would talk about painting his bedroom or the hockey game or whatever. But it never moved much beyond that. But there was a connection, right? There was a connection. And it kind of got, I would say just friendly. And I think he was still confused about why we're doing this, you know? after all those years and all the bad feelings. So anyway, that went on for, I forget how long, a year and a half, maybe or so. I was giving a talk in St. Petersburg Beach in Florida to a room full of therapists. And it went really well. It went really well, and I was feeling really good about it. And as I walked down off the stage, I saw Jan across the room. And as soon as I saw her face, I knew something was up. I knew something was wrong or something was up. So I made my way through the crowd to Jan, and she said, I just got a message while you were talking that your dad's dying and he wants to see you. Right? And boom. I just went right into it right away, thinking, oh my God. And Jan was on the ball. She'd already got me a flight up to Canada to see my dad. And so within 2 hours, I think I was on the plane flying north. And all the way, I'm rehearsing in my head what I need to say to my father.
I've never done that before.
Oh my God. All of us have, And the more I rehearse, the worse I feel. Right? So I get up to Ontario in Canada. This is from Florida to Canada. I get up there. My brother picks me up at the airport. My favorite brother, who I'm closest to, I get in the car, and he and I are in an argument in 2 minutes. So we drive to the hospital. We go there, and there's a half a dozen of my brothers and sisters, all fighting and arguing. There's like a 25-year-old social worker trying to sort it out, and I'm thinking, good luck, buddy. Good luck with that. And I just told them, I'm the oldest. The old man wants to see me. So if he regains consciousness, I'm going in by myself. And one of them started to argue, and I just put it down. It wasn't friendly. It wasn't nice. I said, no, I'm going to go in and see him. That's just it. Right. So I forget how long it was, an hour or so, maybe 2 hours. The doctor came in and said, Mr. Chipman's partially conscious. If anybody wants to see him, you better do it now, So I stood up and I walked down the hall with the doctor. And at this point, I don't even know. I'm just assuming that he's dying from his alcoholism or whatever. So I say to the doctor, what's killing him? He says, well, he's got asbestosis from working with asbestos in the lungs. He's got cirrhosis of the liver from the alcohol. He hasn't eaten in days and days, so his stomach shriveled up. And oh, by the way, he had a triple bypass like a month ago or something. Which nobody told me about, instead of going home and doing the therapy, he went home and sat on the couch drinking whiskey. And I said, well, which one of them's killing him? He said, really, none of them. He said, it's just so much that now he's got pneumonia and he's just going down fast. He said, if anything, the pneumonia's okay. So we come to the ICU, and I think the doctor's going to come in. He opens the door for me, and the door closed behind me. The doctor didn't come in, and I'm looking at this man. At this point, I haven't seen in like 13 years, right? And it's not my father. I mean, it is, but it's this shriveled up skeleton of a person. There's just hardly anything there. And he's just skin and bones. And I went over and I looked down at him, and I'm still, at this point, as I walk towards him, still rehearsing, still thinking about what I want to say. But the second I looked into his eyes, that all just went poof. And this is my explanation of what happened. I'm not saying that anybody else would have seen this or whatever, but something happened where it was like the light in the room changed. It softened. And I looked down into his face, and I saw that he knew who I was. I saw the recognition in his eyes. He wasn't speaking. And I looked at him, and my mind was absolutely quiet. I've never experienced anything like it. There was just this profound silence. Now, when you're in that state, you're really in the now and you're really present. You actually don't know what's going to come over your lips, like what you're going to say. And I didn't. But I looked at this man who's ostensibly dying, and this came out of my mouth. I looked at him and I said, do you want to get out of here? And it shocked me. What are you talking about? He looked really confused, and then he nodded. Right? And I said, all that guilt and shame that you feel right now for how you treated family and your wife, mom, and I could see the tears starting on the side of his face. I said, you're going to have to let that go, or you're never going to get out of it. It's not possible. You have to let go of that feeling. I said, I remember you telling me when you left Newfoundland in Canada to find a new life in the West. When you used to tell that story about making that trip when you were a young man, you would get really excited and you'd be really lit up. and you talk about getting on that train and going west. Excuse me. I said, do you remember that? And he nodded. I said, do you remember the feeling of doing that? And he nodded. And I said, if you want to get out of here, that's the feeling that you've got to hang on to. And you have to know that you were living in a world that was handed to you. And you didn't know there was a world outside of that, because if you had, you would have done better. If you'd have known better, you would have done better. You lost consciousness. Hmm. And I thought to myself, what have I just said to a dying man? Literally made no sense to my intellect. And I went out and went down the hall, and this is showing my age, went to the payphone, pile of quarters into the payphone and phoned Jan and told her what had just happened. If you want to get out, I told her exactly what I said. I said, I can't believe I said that to a dying man. And Jan said, that's really beautiful, really beautiful. And Jan said that, and then I connected. I realized it was what it was. And Jan said, we have this video of the kids. He's not seen them since that they're teenagers now. She said, I'll FedEx this video up to the hospital, and when it gets there, you can show it to them. And it was a silly video. It was like for the insurance company, like, here's the refrigerator, here's the VCR, here's the TV, And every once in a while, the kids were in it. And there's a shot of my son in the garage working on his American muscle car that he and I were restoring together. And there was a shot of my daughter throwing the Frisbee for the dog in the backyard. So anyway, this video comes up. And the next, when it gets there, he regains consciousness again. And I get permission from the doctor to put TV in the room, introduce him to his grandkids. And when he came to, I said, do you want to meet your grandchildren? He just, what? And I said, they're not really here, but you'll see a video. He said, okay. So the doctor, by then there's like half a dozen of maybe 4 or 5 of my brothers and sisters in the room. The doctor says 5 minutes at the most. So we put on the video, and here's the VCR, here's the microwave. And then in the garage is my son, who's 16, in his jeans, no shirt, hot summer Florida day. And we've got this big V8 all tuned up, and he's got it running. He's revving, he's leaning over the motor, revving it up, making this roar. He's looking back with this big grin on his face, right? So there's that. And my dad's watching this, and he's like, you could see it was really hitting. He's seen his grandson, right? Yeah. And then here's a little bit more of the furniture. And then there's this incredible shot of my daughter in the backyard with the sun shining down and the dog chasing the Frisbee, just a little bit of video, right? And he started to cry, and he started to choke. And the doctor said, that's enough. Everybody out. And my dad, first thing I heard him say, he said, no. He wanted to watch the rest of that video. Right? He did. And so the long and the short of it is this. He was supposed to die, but he lived for another 7 years. And what's really interesting is he never took another drink, didn't go to AA or anything. He just quit. And he just became this totally, absolutely different person I had never really known. And started calling our kids and talking about school. Man, he never talked to me about school my whole life. And that healthy individual in there came out. And nobody could understand what happened to him. None of my other brothers, some of them still probably don't believe it because they had such a bad feeling about him, they never reconnected with him. But he became a totally different person. Right? And it's funny, he was too macho to talk to me about what happened in the hospital, but he talked to Jan about it and say how grateful he was. And how, at his funeral, I did the eulogy. My old aunt came up to me after, his sister, about the same age. She was a sweet, sweet person. She said, when your dad was in the hospital last time a few years ago? I said, yeah. She said, he told me the strangest story. And I said, what's that? She says to me, he said that while he was in the hospital, an angel came to him and told him that he was innocent and that he should forgive himself.
Wow.
Yeah. And for me, that experience was so profound. It's so much an important part of my work and the principles moving forward, because in my father, I saw that anybody, and I need anybody. So later on, when we'd be working in the prisons and I'd meet some guy that, was tatted up from head to toe and had a serious drug problem, I could see past the mask and talk to that soul inside, which is all that really happened in that hospital room. That's what shifted our relationship. Was I went to my house and talked to him from there, and he felt it and experienced his own health. That's the only way that kind of profound transformational change could ever be explained.
So it would suggest that actually we're all mentally healthy, or at least that there is health, there is innate health inside of us, because it goes beyond or flies in the face of what most of us think. You have to have years of therapy, or you have to, take these steps in order for you to change. But actually what you're saying is that can happen in an instant, in a moment.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like what we've come to learn with the principles is that once you go inside and you have an insight, you don't have to worry about reorganizing your thought. Your thoughts are all automatically reordered to wisdom, to understanding. You look back at this life and all the things you've been through from that quiet place, from that neutral place, and you see it all with understanding. And because you see it with understanding, your thoughts are automatically reordered. Now, for all of us, that happens at different speeds and different degrees at a time, but it happens, right? And it doesn't really matter about the speed. Once you're, the way I look at it is once you're on the train, you're going to the destination. You might go up and down while you're on the train, but you're still on the damn train.
Yeah, I mean, I've personally experienced this, especially around my relationships, and just even with the relationship that I just ended recently. It's quite amazing to me that even the way in which it ended, and yet there's still a lot of love and respect there. And actually, yeah, there's nothing's changed in that respect. There's definitely the form in which form has changed.
Yeah. Sometimes it's really appropriate for the form to change, but it doesn't have to change the feeling, which is
no, it doesn't.
Counter to what people think.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah, because I remember having an insight about this when Leo was small, and my ex-husband and I, ex-husband being the operative word, no longer together, and realizing you can really love somebody, but it doesn't mean that you need to live in the same house.
Yeah, I mean, there's times when it's appropriate not to, obviously for your own health. But that idea that, and I've known a number of couples who've separated over the years who have maintained a beautiful relationship. So the relationship's not dependent on the form.
No, it's totally not. But that's contrary once again to popular belief. And I remember you sharing something with me, which I think which kind of came to mind just now, which was the trip you did with your son and having that realization.
Oh, yeah, that's good. Yeah, my son works in Washington, D.C., and we're out here on the West Coast, a long ways away. And he worked there for 20 years for the federal government and then resigned. I won't go into why, but he resigned, needed a break. And he wanted to do some writing and so on. So he decided that he would sell his house and come and stay with us for a year here in Salt Spring. And we thought that's great because really we haven't lived within a couple thousand miles of him since he went off to college, and he's like 47. So I thought, well, that'd be great. So I fly out to D.C. to help him pack up his house, right? And I'm doing the typical, he's got all this stuff. It doesn't fit in storage. And why do you need 3 bicycles? You're the father thing in my head, right? And, you shouldn't be collecting all this, and blah, 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 blah. And finally, it took us about 3 days, I think more than 3 days, maybe 3.5 days, to get 20 years of a household put into storage, right? So then we jump in his car, which was fun because it was a Tesla. We were driving across the country in a Tesla Model S, which I had never experienced. So anyway, we get in the car and we started the drive. And in my head, I'm still doing all this, you know. And meanwhile, he's trying to tell me about his vision. Like he's very, I don't want to say he's political. It's not political. He's into service to the country, you know, particularly as it applies to the environment. So he's trying to tell me about his vision for next year. And I'm still thinking about, why do you have 3 bicycles? Second or third day into it, we're driving along, and it just hits me that I'm listening to this wonderful young man with my father ears. And I'm thinking about all this father stuff, you know. It's like, I went, oh, right. And it was just the most amazing. It was like magic. It's like I just let it go, and I started listening to him. And I went, oh, my God, you know, I don't know this man. And it just changed the whole trip. You know, we had 10 days together after that. It was just phenomenal. And I felt like, I know this sounds strange, but I felt like I was meeting my son for the first time because I was listening to him. I dropped the past, put it that way, and I got out of my father ears. You know, it's not to say there isn't a place now and then for father ears, but it's not a good operating platform, put it that way.
It's really interesting you say that, because actually something occurred to me today, and it was very subtle, but it's certainly something that I kind of ended up reflecting on. This morning, I bought Leo, my little one, some glasses that he can wear that protect him from the blue rays of the screens. Mm-hmm. And he said to me this morning, he's like, Mama, can I take these to he's got a little summer camp that he goes to. And I've got my mama ears on, right? Going, no, he's going to lose them. No, we're going to keep them here. And he goes, but there's a TV there. And I'm like, you don't need it for the TV. It's just for the screens. But best to leave them here so you don't lose them. Anyway, so I go off this morning, whatever, he's there. And on the way back home, I suddenly go, I think I saw some computer screens there, like little iPad screens.
Right.
That's what he must have been referring to. And that these glasses are perfect for that. That's exactly why I bought them. Mm-hmm. And so it suddenly sort of dawned on me, how often do I kind of go, yeah. yeah. No, Mummy knows better.
Yeah.
And I suddenly went, no, I don't know better in this case.
Exactly. Like I said, there are places when it's right to know better.
Right.
But it's not good as a permanent operating system.
No, it's not. And I'm really glad, like, it just, and what came to mind was the story that you had with your son. It came to mind for me today. And I was thinking, how often did I do that to Leo? Because actually his suggestion was spot on.
Yeah.
I actually went back to him and I said, look, sorry, your suggestion was actually really spot on, Baba. Tomorrow we're going to take your glasses. Yeah, absolutely. He goes, thank you, Mama. So it was like this moment of like, I think I need to listen to my son a little bit better.
That's beautiful. It really is. And you know what? It's not about you had it wrong to begin with, because even that's good for him. It's really good for him to see you reconsider and come back to that space with him. I mean, Jen and I were doing a talk at the London conference once, and for whatever reason, they asked us to do a talk on parenting. And we hadn't had kids for a long time, right? But we did it. So we ended up talking about my daughter and son-in-law and the boys, my grandkids, and just talking about it. They're just amazing parents. And so somebody in the audience put up their hands and said they're into the principles. And I said, well, they are. They love Sid's books and they listen, but they're not in the community. They just live their lives, right? And to them, they grew up with it. My daughter grew up with it. She's like a fish in water. I said, what's unique about them as parents is not that they're perfect, right? What's unique about them is this is what their kids see. Their kids see that mom and dad have stuff come up that's hard and difficult with work and money, just like every other couple on the planet, right? And they see that mom and dad get upset once in a while or get concerned or worried. What they see consistently, however, is that mom and dad know how to get back to square one. And no matter what happens, they do get back to square one. They do get back to that healthy feeling. So for those kids, that's normal.
Mm.
That is their normal. That life is a contact sport. Stuff's going to happen. You're not always going to be, thrilled with everything. You're going to have conflict sometimes, but there is a square one. There is a place where it's peaceful and you're more your true self. To those kids, that's normal. And I said, that's what I love about watching them as parents. Not that they're perfect, is that the kids just see that there'll always be health and happiness. We'll always get back to it. And I to this day, I love that idea that, we're not perfect, but our kids saw us get back to square one on a regular basis. So it was normal for them to see that. As opposed to the way I grew up, nobody ever got back to square one. It's just worse and worse, right?
Worse and worse. But I love that. I love that because I see Leo get caught up. It's not like we're going to be flatline peace forever, all the time. But it's literally like I see him go into it and then he's out of it again. And that actually is just so beautiful to see that that is that simple. It is that simple. It is that simple. So thank you so much, Chip, because your stories, where you come from, the energy that you share these stories from, I know has such an impact, not only on all of the clients that you've ever served, but also I've experienced it firsthand. And I hope that any of you that have been listening today can sense that, or at least certainly lots of hope. If someone is listening in and said, oh my gosh, I've got to get into contact with this good-looking old man who plays bluegrass.
Watch it on the old thing.
Yeah, absolutely.
Good-looking, mature man.
Good-looking, mature man. Where can they reach out to you?
Well, my website is Chip, CHIP, at Vantage, VANTAGC, Vantage.com. Chip at VantageConsult.com.
We'll make sure that we put that information in the show notes.
Great. And if everybody wants to email, I can get back to them through email. I'd love to.
Thank you so, so much, Chip. Once again, it's always such a pleasure to speak to you and to listen to your incredibly miraculous stories.
Well, thank you. And, Marina is one of my favorite people in this world to talk to. I mean, she does at an amazing rate, and she laughs at herself, which is a gift. It really is. It's a gift. And I've learned a lot from Marina that way, and I really appreciate it.
You sometimes, there are lots of times that I don't, but thank you for the reflection back. I find that laughing is actually, and joy is actually, what was it? Bill Pettit said it. It's like sun for the fungus in a dark room. It dries it out.
Well, Sid loved to laugh, and he said something really interesting to me one time. He said, do you ever notice that when you have a good belly laugh that you can't think?
Ah.
And I went, oh. You proceeded to laugh until he couldn't laugh anymore. Anyway, lovely to be with you.
Thank you so much, Tim. Bye-bye for now. And there we have it, another amazing episode of The Joy of Being. If you enjoyed this podcast, you may well enjoy the book as well. You can either download a free chapter, www.marinapearson.com/chapter, where I go into much more depth into how we can create more time and space as mums. And if that doesn't fly and you're more curious about getting the entire book, then you can do that too at www.marinapearson.com/book. Until the next time, remember, you are the joy you seek.